to a winter wonderland. That is a visit from old Jack Frost. We've been having fog, and then we got freezing temperatures in the 20s, and this is the result. If I can't have snow, at least I got frost-covered world. Frost-covered horses. Nam Nam Ken looks like she's seeing something. They're often looking out there, and sometimes I see a coyote. I'm pretty sure it's mostly coyotes that they see. Once I think a bobcat or a cougar came through because they were really worked up. If you watch your animals enough, you can tell the difference in their behavior. And I've actually seen my horse's behavior around cougars when I saw the cougar myself. And it's a different type of worked up from when they see coyotes. Hey, good morning, guys. Morning, Chris James. And Outdoor Videos with Brad. We got Brad and Chris back. And Craig, good morning. God bless Texas. All right, here we are. No, I didn't get snow. For those of you who missed my very opening, it's all icy winter wonderland out there. We didn't get snow, but we got cold temperatures and we got fog. It's like a cloud is coming through. I go out there with my headlamp and all I can see is mist right in front of my face. And so I guess it's a cloud. I don't know, but then it settles down in town. And so it's been nice and sunny here. And now I hope today's sunny. I just get a lot more energy when it's sunny, and I can charge my solar panels, which means I can watch movies, which I consider research. Hey, Justin, good morning, amigo. We're already talking bandanas, Justin and I. All right, guys, I'm going to plug in the microphones. They worked yesterday, so let's hope they work today. All right, here we go. All right. I was actually outside using a tree, and I noticed it was 8:30. So I literally got caught with my pants down, which is more information than some people want, but I don't have any women viewers anyway, according to Facebook, or according to YouTube, so it doesn't matter. All right, for those of you just joining, that was a joke. Don't take me too seriously. Please, folks, don't take me seriously. Nearly everything I say is a joke. Unless I'm talking history. This is my... Ah, crap. It's lower? Gosh darn it. All right. I'm also not joking now. Well, you guys didn't even hear that. This irritates the heck out of me. I don't know what's going on with my microphones. I mean, it's the same thing I've been doing for a long time. So I'll just have to yell at the phone. Anyway, showing you guys the winter wonderland again. Yeah, that's so strange. Oh, it's frustrating because I want to be able to use the microphone so I can walk around and talk. But at least this works. Hey, I'm not going to complain about that. So anyway, normally I've got a view where I can see for 20 miles. So it's kind of fun. I enjoy the fog, but I also like the frost is a nice touch. And it motivates some people to do that to their hair. They like it so much. All right. Well, I got the dog's food cooking. Somebody gave a friend in town gave me a huge old plastic tote of elk burger because he left it. What he told me was, I hadn't heard of this before. He said by leaving it on the carcass too long before he cut it off the elk, it got bone sour, where some bacteria grows out from the bone, which, as you all know, I've done a lot of meat on carcasses for months, and I don't know, I just think it adds flavor. I think that's kind of like what the way the French ate their meat. Actually, I think historically it was pretty common. Maybe not, maybe, but anyway, it can develop a bad taste, I think. So he gave it to me, and I was very grateful. And I've been feeding it to my dogs. I haven't been eating it myself. So, and this big fatty. Oh, sorry, Maddie. Sorry, girl. This big fatty, she got into it. I accidentally left the rest of it uncovered, so she finished it off out on the porch last night. Right? That's why you're so fat. And oh, gosh. She's old, so she can't jump around. That's all right. You okay? Poor girl. Doggone it. So anyway, she got belly rubs. She went right into belly rub position, so she's not upset. So anyway, she finished off the meat, and so now they're getting a late breakfast because I got to cook this morning, and like I say, that's why she's so fat. She always finishes off Sparta's food if I don't catch her in time, and then she gets whatever was outside. So now I'm cooking some liver to add to it. So anyway, my dogs eat well. They eat better than I do. Sledster Ban Cole, good morning. Sledster, I'm going to assume, are you up in Alaska? Something like that? Brad says it gets like that at my place. He's talking about the frost. And then the sun comes out and clears it away most times. Yeah, hopefully. Yesterday it started off really foggy, like thick fog in the morning. And then by this time it was already sunny. And man, I get so much more motivation from the sun. Yeah, all right. Somebody pointed out my bandana collar. It's annoying, but I'm not even going to mess with it because these bandanas, they're triangles, so they get thick back there. I don't know. I mean, I guess I can try. It might bug people. I'm trying to focus. Normally with a bandana, I don't even wear it under the collar, so this is new for me. This one's so thin, it's silk and it's thin. Oh, hey, Nick. Yeah, that's maybe social media is big on nicknames these days, and sometimes they do it involuntarily. So maybe that's what's going on there. So thanks, Steve Whitman. Hopefully that's better. I don't want it to be annoying anybody. What's annoying me is my hair. I need to cut my hair. I've been noticing that in my photos lately, so I'm gonna have to do that. Hey, Nick, I thought about putting a hand crank on that truck to open the door. Casey, hey, man. Casey's the mountain man reenactor over in Idaho. I'm curing my deer shoulders today. Oh, gosh, awesome. And making haggis. I've only heard about haggis. You're a brave man. The curing sounds awesome. Cured meat is a treat. Jennifer is in Oklahoma, and she said, oh, here, we got snow around us here in Oklahoma, but nothing. Oh, interesting. Wow. So you guys are getting some cold weather. Yeah, I'm happy about this bandana, even though I think Justin has said he doesn't think they had 3 colors. You know, Justin, didn't you say that you thought it was just 2 colored bandanas? However, the South Union Mills, I noticed, have 3 colors. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm misremembering. But yeah, I got this in Texas at the thrift store where the woman brought in a whole bunch of homemade pie as a customer appreciation day, and I happened in on that day. She was super cool. Really good pie. I love homemade pie, by the way. Casey says haggis is awesome. Made it in winter camp a couple years back. Isn't it fermented? I don't know. I always figure most of those gross foods are fermented. Yeah, so anyway, so Maddie's hungry, but she's figured out that she's gonna have to wait, and she's sitting down. All right. Well, I posted about hats today. I got a hat on order. Um, I've got a hat on order. Oh, let's finish up a couple of things here. Have a few more weekends of hunting. Oh, nice. Yeah, no rush on my part by any means. I'm not in any hurry. Uh, I mean, I can always use my trailer anyway if I need to. Just want to use it for fun. But what kind of hunting? Bird? Fowl? Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I misremembered, Justin. Thank you for clarifying. Um, haggis is fresh meat. Oh, okay. So it's just the guts. So anyway, I've been posting a little bit, or maybe like 2 posts now, about the vaquero influence on the American cowboy. And now, to start out, tons of influence. A lot of our styles and methods came from the vaqueros. So that's not what is up for debate. I say that, and yet the initial response is people saying that it was all about the vaqueros. And I'm saying that that's not to be denied. What I'm saying is that what we see is a lot of these absolute claims that if it weren't for the Spanish, there would be no such thing as the American cowboy. And that's just absolutely insane. First point is places have been herding livestock for thousands of years. So it didn't just happen that all the Europeans that came to America didn't know how to herd cows, and then the Texans watched the Spanish doing it and said, "Hey, look what they're doing. We should try that." That's how the history is depicted. And I kind of felt that way for a while, but in my studying, I realized, well, wait a minute. Every culture was herding cattle. So what practices did we already have, and what practices did we get from the Spanish? Because we got a lot of practices from the Spanish. Just not all of it, which is what the Facebook historians want us to believe, because that fits that anti-white narrative. So anyway, I've been posting about that. And today I posted about hats, because that's one I saw. Somebody posted it recently saying the Boss of the Plains. My hat isn't an exact replica of the Boss of the Plains, but it's the most famous cowboy hat. And it's what the cowboys started wearing in the 1880s, as I understand. Light colored, as in white, light colored, Boss of the Plains. And there's people posting that the Boss of the Plains hat wouldn't exist if it weren't for the Spanish, which is just asinine. It's just asinine. Now, it's true that in the early days, the Texas Cowboys, I have multiple references about this, that they wore Spanish-style wide-brim hats. We don't know what kind. Some people say that Billy the Kid wore a sugar loaf, which is a specific style, but there's no evidence for it, not that I've found. And I've asked these people where they got the claim, and basically one guy made it up and everybody repeated it, that it was a sugar loaf. There is solid evidence that Billy the Kid was known to wear a wide-brimmed Mexican-style hat. So what that means, we don't know. It's lost to history at this point. I'm trying to piece it together. And unfortunately, the photo that we have of him, the one photo, maybe a second one, I personally don't have a problem with thinking the croquet photo is Billy the Kid. For those of you who don't know, there's one that came up of like 4 guys, I think it was, playing croquet, and I believe the people who decide these things decided that it is Billy the Kid. But that doesn't mean they're right. It's still up for debate. But personally, I think it is Billy the Kid, or very likely could be. I don't think that they really have solid enough proof to prove it. But anyway, point is, neither of those photos show Billy the Kid in the hat that he was reputed to wear. Because he was most commonly described as wearing a wide brim cowboy hat. And that was in the 70s, the late 1870s. And then the steamboat Arabia, that went down in a river in 1856, and then it was exhumed from its silt covered deathbed, I guess. I was trying to be more poetic there. Recently, like 10 or 20 years ago or whatever. And on it, they had hats that pretty much look like the Pilgrim's hats that we grew up knowing about, but without the wide band and buckle. I believe that buckle and wide band is just totally fabricated. Well, it might have got inspired from something, but anyway, the Pilgrims with their wide brim and their tall crown. But this one wasn't quite as tall. It was in the Arabia hat was like maybe an inch taller than mine, and it went a little more narrow at the top, but not super narrow like a sugar loaf, just a little more narrow. So that was in 1856, and Casey brought up a point, which we'll get to that. And now the Texas Cowboys became a thing after the Civil War. So what happened was Texas was getting populated. People were bringing cattle there and getting Spanish cattle. And then the men went away to the war, and the kids and the wives tried to hide the cattle from the military that would come and take it, whether it was Union soldiers or Confederate soldiers. They'd take people's cattle and chickens and horses. And so a lot of times the women would send the kids out into the field to try to hide the cattle and keep them. But anyway, during the Civil War, a lot of cattle went loose and went wild. And so by the time the men came back after the Civil War, there was tons of wild cattle running loose. And they called these... I don't remember what name they had for them. Maverick, might have been Mavericks. Maverick was a later term for sure, but this is 60s. So anyway, that's when the Texas Cowboy, the Texas Cowboys started to rise. And in the early days, there was a lot of racism that they didn't want to imitate the Spanish, but they did. And over the decades, this is what I'm piecing together. By the 80s, they just wholeheartedly just adopted the Spanish styles. And going up the trails, there was a large mix of Americans and Mexicans driving the cattle, from what I've read. Pretty good percentage mix. I've not run across any reason to think that it was 25% black cowboys. But there were quite a few. But that was out of Texas. That's another claim on Facebook, is that black people made up 25 or 30% of cowboys. Another of the narratives that they try to push to... Anyway, so in the 60s, that's when the Texas Cowboy really started to gain prominence and started to become a thing in the 60s. And like I said, in the 50s is when the steamboat Arabia sank, and they had a hat that was pretty similar to the Boss of the Plains. I already described it. So in other words, do all these Facebook historians think that 56 was the end of the wide brim hat, and then in the 60s, the Texas Cowboys said, hey, look at those hats that the Spanish are wearing? Now, they did do that in spite of the racism, the separation between Americans and Mexicans that existed in Texas. I should say Texans and Mexicans, because Texans even separated themselves from Americans. Texans are a unique breed, and they are known to wear Spanish-styled wide brim hats. I have accounts as early as the 60s that Texans started wearing that style. And I have a couple of artist renditions of cowboys. I don't have any pictures, unfortunately. I would love to run across one or two or 10. But so far I only have pictures. And that's what I posted on Instagram this morning. I don't think I posted that one on Facebook. So, and then as Casey pointed out, let's see. Casey said Boss of the Plains seems to be a fitted iteration of the low crown worn before 1850. Yeah, the going back even before the 50s was the fur trade era, which they were known. The free trappers, the trappers were known to wear wide brim, low crown hats. Very similar to the Boss of the Plains, except for a lower crown. Like the Boss of the Plains had a crown about like mine in height. I think mine goes a little more narrow than the Boss of the Plains, where the Boss of the Plains went straight and mine goes kind of narrow. But pretty similar for what we're discussing. And in the fur trade era, they're said to wear lower crowns but wide brims. And those, they came directly out of the east. I mean, they came out from the south, from the north, from the French. They mostly filtered through St. Louis, Missouri, and that was the launching point. And so again, do we think that then the wide brim hat just went completely out of style and forgotten until 1856, and then went completely out of memory again until the Texans saw them in the Spanish wearing them? Now, I'll reiterate that we did get a lot of style, and really cool style, from the vaqueros. I mean, I'm happy to acknowledge that. Like, I love the style of the Spanish, and there's a lot of paintings from early 1830s, 1840s, 1850s, and it's super cool. Like bell bottoms came from the Spanish, I think. I don't know. A lot of fashion came from war soldiers. I think that the French and the English were the forefront of fashion for a few hundred years, and it was primarily modeled off of soldier uniforms. And so anyway, so I don't know if the Spanish started the flared leg that we got the bell bottoms from, but they certainly used it for a long time and made it really freaking cool. And so anyway, all I'm trying to do is get more of a clear understanding of what styles were adopted, because the main thing that came to me was, I talk a lot about the guy here in my valley. He moved here in 61. He was in a different valley about 60 miles away or 70 miles away in 1859, I think, is when he moved there. So he was in Washington from the late 50s to and then on. And they were driving cattle. We had our first big cattle drive in 1858 was our big cattle drive, where we drove cattle up to Canada. That was way before the Texan cattle drives. No offense to any Texans watching. I'm not trying to take away any of your glory. But so that got me thinking, if cowboy style wasn't really established until the late 60s, early 70s, which I believe I have proof for now, makes me ask, well, what kind of practices did they use here in Washington in the late 50s or early 60s? Because the Texans hadn't adopted the Spanish style yet, so it just makes me wonder. Could have been the California style. So again, it could have been influenced highly by the Spanish, but over by California, which, according to Charlie Russell, the famous cowboy painter, was a distinct style. That's the only place I've heard of it, and I hope to track it down and learn more about it eventually, what kind of styles came out of California. But he said it was a distinctly different style coming out of California. So it very well could have influenced what we did here in Washington, because the miners went to California when it was still Spanish, and then our cattle came up from California. We had miners and cattle coming up from California in the 50s. So anyway, let's go to some questions and comments here. Oh yeah. Brad, the stomach is just the casing and it isn't eaten. You don't eat the stomach, huh? I'm surprised. The innards are heart, liver, lung, scrap meat, oats, barley, and suet. Oh. I once was gonna lung. I think I have. No live stream for, nothing else to say. Yeah. It's not easy coming up with an hour or two of stuff to talk about. Pattern 51 lever, like your tie. Thank you. Appreciate that. I really like this one. It's my dressier one. I've got another South Union Mills bandana on its way. Casey says round hats from 1790 to 1820s, 30s could have influenced the later hats as well. Yeah. I mean, I think we got wide-brimmed hats going probably even into the 1600s, don't we? Like the pilgrim hats were a thing. They just didn't have the buckles, as I understand. The Dutch were wearing wide-brimmed hats in the 1600s, I believe. So anyway, I think that we got the saddle horn from the Spanish. I think we got the lariat, which that's what I'm really wondering is, I really want to know how they handled horses in Europe, in places like Holland. Wait, what do we call that? Yeah. Netherlands. Places like the Netherlands, Germany, England, Ireland. It'd be interesting to see how they handled cattle, and then what practices they brought here to the New World, and then how, so that we could know more precisely how it changed from the Spanish influence. Maddie's sleeping here by her food. Yeah, so anyway, that's what I've been posting about, and among other things. And I'm getting cold. I'm going to go close my door. Let's see if the sun's shining yet. Nope. Still nestled in a cloud. So who knows when I'm going to be able to charge my solar panels again. Fortunately, they are, most of them are charged. Only one of them is low. I've got 5. And the horses are hiding out. Pattern 51 Lover says, do I think there are ever such things like cowboys in Europe, or would they just live close enough to home that they wouldn't have to rough it? Yeah, my guess, and like I say, I'd like to learn this stuff, but like, my understanding is a lot of those countries have practices of, I'm going to speak very generally, so if anybody has more information, feel free to add it, but places like Switzerland, England, they have like community property. And this is still practiced in Turkey as well for sheep herding, where there's community property, kind of like we have, of except here you get one ranch that gets a lease of public land, where they're, I think that they still have to file it so that they don't overgraze. But basically, like if you had your little farm of 5 or 10 or 15 acres, whatever, and then you got your public land where you're allowed to take X amount of cows out to the communal land, and I suspect they would have done it just like everybody else in history, except for the Scythians and the Spanish, where they send the kids out. Um, uh, because you got to protect the herds when you send them out to those public lands, and so you send out the littlest kid. Tell the oldest kid, "Hey, go watch the cattle." He tells the next oldest, "Go watch the cattle." He tells the next oldest, until it gets to the youngest, and he has to go out there. I've talked about this before. I got to see that in South Africa, where my friend told me what it was like. He said he was a little kid, and he had to watch the cattle, and he said it was cold and miserable, and like when it rained, he had to go hide out in a cave. They have a lot of outcroppings that they call caves, and it was just like reading about in the Old Testament times. So I suspect that was more the European practice. The thing about the Spanish is, what I like to say is, they made being a cowboy cool, because these other cultures had cattle, they raised them, but it was always something where you didn't want to do it. Like again, in Africa, I knew a guy, he was a sheep herder, and he was like low rung on the totem pole. His clothes were all in tatters, and he got paid next to nothing. And it wasn't a desirable job. But so that's where I say, like, the Spanish made it cool, because they did everything on horseback. And so then and they dressed fancy, made their horses look cool, and it became like this elite status thing, where every other culture that I'm aware of, it was, like I said, it was not what you wanted to do, and it was not elite. You pushed it off to the little kids. So that's my understanding at this point. They had sheep herds in Europe. Yes, they certainly did. They did have cattle, because the Texans, they would go up the trail, and they called the other cattle shorthorns, and then shorthorns became a term for northern or Yankees, because the Texas Cowboys were very I always forget words. They were very very proud. They were very proud. They considered themselves better than everybody, and they looked down on everybody, and they especially looked down on Northerners, because a lot of them were still raw from the war. So anyway, they called them shorthorns. The cattle were short-horned, and the people, they called them shorthorns eventually. And I forgot why I brought that up. Anyway, do you think, or they just live close enough to home? Somewhere in the U.S., there is a town where more percentage of people wear old-style hats than anywhere else. I wonder where it is. Well, this is an Amish hat. So, Pennsylvania, I suppose. Wyoming, maybe. Casey says, I think horses were more military use in Europe, expensive to keep, and they had more need for beasts of burden that could move carts. Yeah, that's my understanding too. Like, that's something else. We often look back. One of the draws of being a cowboy was that you got to ride horseback. And not everybody knew how to ride horseback. It was like, in cities, people would walk, and in Europe, walking was very common. And or if you were going to do something by horse, you'd hire a carriage to carry you. It wasn't like everybody owned a horse and rode around. And that was what was cool in Italy, getting to see these old villages that probably living a lot of the ways they've lived for a couple thousand years. Like all the kids running to school. I know we've got a little bit of that in America. I walked to school, but it wasn't like there in the little village. It was the norm. It was just so weird to see. Um, and like all the adults, so kids were running to school, playing around on their way to school. Mothers and the women were going to the open air market to get stuff for the day. Men were sitting around talking. It was just so cool, and you just think about that. Probably how they've been living for a couple thousand years because these buildings were thousands of years old, and there's no reason to have a car. There's no reason to have a horse. The whole village that I'm thinking of, it's called Orvieto. I put an accent on it. I don't know if that's correct. Orvieto. I don't know how to say it without an accent. Um, it's only like a few miles wide, and it's up on top of a mountain. And guys, Italy is so cool. The old villages. They built these amazing towns on mountains because they're easier to fortify against attack. And I walked up that mountain. They have a tram, or what would you call it? Like those things that they use, like a ski lift, only in a box. They have that to get up to the village. So you park at the bottom if you have a car, or if you take the train. But I went there at 2 a.m. and so that was closed, and I had to walk up the old road, going through the archways, and just imagining, man, how would a military even attack this town? Granted, on the backside, it was less of a steep approach. So if they got attacked, it was probably from that side. But anyway, pretty common. And so anyway, my point is, in Europe, horseback riding was not the norm. It's not like, and even on the East Coast, the Indians over there didn't adopt the horse like they did out on the plains, because even around here, you go up into the mountains and suddenly you realize you got to find a trail. And if there's no trail, a lot of times you can't, it's pointless to have a horse. It's actually easier. Once when I was working with cattle, I was so new I didn't get off my horse. But in retrospect, I wish I would have, because we lost these cows. They were walking through these deadfalls, these trees that fell down. We couldn't get our horses through. We couldn't get around them. We could like follow the cows, but we couldn't get around them. And I wanted so bad to jump off. I had more energy then, and just steer the cows back. But like I said, I was too new, so I wasn't really confident to do it. In retrospect, I could have turned them, but we couldn't get the horses in. So anyway, the point is, riding horseback, it was a very Western thing, even in the 1800s in America. And that was part of the appeal. Like the German settlers, that's why there's these books about white Indians, these kids that got kidnapped by Comanche and Apache. If you've read Empire of the Summer Moon, he talks a lot about it, and I read that, and then I went and looked for the books. These kids that got kidnapped and then raised as Comanches and Apaches, and the funny thing is that these kids didn't want to go home. Like, their parents were looking for them, and the whole community would be out looking for them, or they'd get the Texas Rangers looking for them. And there were times when the kids were found, or the people came into their village, but the kids hid because they didn't want to go back home, because being back home was miserable. They were treated. Northern Europeans aren't known for treating kids well. It's the old only speak if you're spoken to kind of mentality. There's other sayings, and I can't think of them right now, but kids are to be seen, not heard, stuff like that. And so these kids would be sent out to work miserable farm work, and then they get kidnapped, and they daydream about being a cowboy. That's a very common one. They'd see cowboys coming by, the parents would feed them. and the kids would daydream about the wild life of being a cowboy. And so sometimes they'd get kidnapped by Indians, and then and the way that the Indians would raise their kids was, I think there's a lot to be learned from it. Um, like they didn't, everything was fun. Like when you're a kid, you're training to be a warrior, and so the kids would play fight with each other. They'd play hunt with each other. They would have to watch the adults' horses. But even then, I've got a firsthand account of a guy who talks about his time. This was an actual Indian guy, not a white guy. Talks about what life was like, and he said his dad was a chief, and he said he always had to watch the horses, his dad's horses, and then his friends were watching their dad's horses, and so he talks about what they would do, and they would play hunt, they'd play fight, they'd take their bows and arrows, and one day he tells a story about they killed some rock chucks, and so he took them home to his mom because they had more than they could eat for lunch, and he took them home, and his mom was all happy. So that's how tribal life, nomadic life, you're training to be a warrior because being a warrior is essential to that lifestyle. And you can imagine how that appeals so much more to a kid. And one of the white Indians who got kidnapped and wanted to stay, he tells the story of how his dad, I think, was a chief, and he had this buffalo hide shield, and he gave a gun to the kid. And as a reader, you're thinking, oh man, is the kid going to shoot the guy and escape? He didn't want to escape. He had the kid shoot at him, and the dad was demonstrating to him how to use a thick buffalo hide shield, because back then the guns weren't powerful enough to penetrate the buffalo hide shields that they carried. And he showed it to him, and then he gave him a shield. I mean, imagine that kind of a lifestyle of growing up versus having to go and hoe weeds in a field all day long, and only speak if you're spoken to, and that kind of thing. So anyway, all that to say that riding horseback was part of the appeal of being a cowboy, and that not everybody could. So you had these farm kids. They grew up on the frontier, but they didn't get to ride a horse because maybe the family had one horse, or maybe they had two horses and they were a team, or maybe they just had oxen for a team. And the Europeans, they didn't think about riding horses. They thought about, because if you're a farmer in Europe, you take your wagon into town and get supplies. You don't ride a horse. So riding a horse is a uniquely frontier thing. Not completely uniquely, but of course, the military used them to get around quickly, particularly officers, mostly, or if they had the cavalry. So anyway, I hope that is clear what I'm trying to put across. Let's go back to some comments here. Oh boy, lots of comments. Serfdom kept people in their local regions. Yes, it did. But also, just there wasn't a lot of reason to really travel a lot. People started working in towns. That's when serfdom, or whatever it was called, started to transition into mercantilism, and we started and then capitalism, and people started moving to towns a lot more than having farms. Even in World War II, the Germans still used horses. That was only 80 years ago. The Russians are still using horses. Yeah. I wonder how much of that relied on the gentleman's agreement of not shooting officers. We won't get into war. Brad says, I wish I could find Amish clothing. You don't see it at their shops. I guess you have to know someone or be in the clique. You're in Pennsylvania, aren't you? I still think of you as way down south. I know of a hat store in Pennsylvania. If you want to know it, message me. I'll grab it. They're out there. You can get these hats. There's a store that's full of these hats. I called them to find out prices and stuff. They're fairly inexpensive too. I think they're like $110. Lots of that in Kentucky if you know where to look. Oh, okay. Oh, shoot. They have Amish in Kentucky. I've actually been there a couple times, but only in the city visiting friends. I'm in Amish territory in Pennsylvania. I go to a lot of different shops. Probably have luck at yard sales. How can you have any pudding if you don't eat your meat? Hey, there's Benjamin Rickard. How about that? He's a local. Oh, well, this is fun. I love talking history, and particularly, well, I like talking all history. Mercantilism and into capitalism is one of my interests, but I've not been studying it lately. But I need to get back into studying more things and do those videos on my other channel. But I just haven't got around to it. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that pretty much covers the whole hat thing, the hat and Spanish issue. Yeah, these are good quality hats for inexpensive. I've got a hat on order. Speaking of wide-brimmed hats, I'm pretty excited because my impression, I'm trying to do late 70s, like 1877, 78, 79. And it's hard to get stuff for that. But I got a guy in Sweden. They call him the Swede. He's a hat maker. And he's working on one for me that might end up being a 5.5 inch brim, which is really wide by normal standards. Like this one is probably 4 inch, I believe, or 3.5, 3 3/4, something like that. This one is 4 inch, and that's a wide brim. 4 inch is pretty wide, and it might even be the width that cowboys wore. From what I can see in history, from what I'm putting together, but I don't really have solid proof, it seems like 4 inch brim was considered a wide brim hat. The most common was 2 and 3 inch brims, from what I can tell, and usually, not usually, sometimes often curled a little bit. And from what I'm seeing in the photos, the only time people wear wide brim hats was if there was some kind of a frontiersman, whether it was a cowboy or like a scout or a guide, that kind of thing. Those guys that lived more of a wild life on the frontier. Like, I don't think we see it with buffalo hunters and miners as much. So anyway, so I'm excited to get that 5.5 inch brim hat. It's gonna really set off my 70s impression. Because in my opinion, by the 80s, the hats went a little more narrow, like the 4 inch brim. So still wide, but not like they had in the 70s, is my belief at this point. But I'm still trying to piece all this together. Brad says he has an Australian digger hat. That's close enough that I've used for summer work. What's a digger hat? Is that like that that famous Australian cowboy movie, the kind that he wore? Kind of got really popular in the 90s, and I bought one. Casey says, my Fort Hall hat, circa 1830, is 5 inch. It is quite wide, but specifically wanted in southern Idaho. Yeah, I think my fur trapper hat is 5-inch, but mine is wool, because what I read about, the accounts I read for fur trade era was that they commonly wore wide brim wool hats. And so I got a wool hat. So it's awfully curved to keep the brim from flattening, but I've never really even worn it. I bought it and then kind of gave up on fur trade era. But this one is a good quality fur felt, and so it should be able to go flat. Chris James is another historian of the Old West. I tend to agree. The 70s was wild with wild styles until they started toning it down in the 80s, in my opinion, of course. Yeah, that seems to be. I mean, what I did find out was as early as 1874, there was an established cowboy style. But yeah, I feel like I agree. It seems like in everything, the 70s was developing and getting a feel for what they wanted to do, and then by the 80s they were a lot more confident with styles and more established. I feel like that for everything about 70s and 80s. That's why Marty likes the 70s, from what I gather. The 70s were very much a transition time, lots of growth when the trains were arriving everywhere and creating booms. So it was going from the transition time from St. Louis being the jump off point from civilization into the wilds, into, well, now we got trains supplying many towns, and so they were more robust towns. And then by the 80s, that was all pretty, I mean, it was still happening, but not nearly to the degree of it being brand new like it was in the 70s. So that's my explanation for the 70s. Thank you, Chris. I am just blown away because, like I say, just a few months ago, I had no idea when the cowboy look really got established. We only had any evidence that I knew of for the 80s, and then my brother loaned me this book. It's in there. It's a photocopied book in a binder. He loaned it to me, a famous researcher, and this guy would make claims, and then he made claims, and so I looked for the footnotes to see where he got those, and I still never got through his book because I'd go grab the book that he was referencing, and that's where I found these books that have all kinds of information for the 70s and 60s even. And so, boom, all of a sudden, just 70s cowboy information has just flooded into my into my presence. So the one book that I really treasure was written in 1874. And like I say, the reason I treasure that book so much is when you get these guys writing in the 1920s, talking about their experiences in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it's really hard to trust what they say, because, like, let's say a guy says, yeah, I was wearing a Boss of the Plains hat, really proud of it, and that was on the trail drive of 1877. It's like, wait a minute, we don't have proof of the Boss of the Plains. I think I'm remembering it right. Somebody correct me about Boss of the Plains. But I'm just using for an example. If he makes a claim about using something that didn't exist until the 80s, but he makes a claim of having it in the 70s, well, we don't, it's just not really reliable. So you have to say, well, maybe he was remembering correctly, or maybe he was misremembering and applying an 1880s memory to the 1870s. And so I don't just throw it out like a lot of people do. They're really quick to throw away information. I just keep it open-ended. Things like that, like Spanish loop holster. That's a holster style that we only have proof for the 80s. But there is a guy that says he had one in the 70s. But he's writing in the like early 1900s. And so when that's the only reference we just have one, you got to hold off on making a claim. So to me, I just leave it loose-ended. A lot of people say, no, he misremembered. It's like, well, you don't know that he misremembered. But we also don't know that he remembered. So I just leave it loose-ended. And that takes discipline, because our human nature wants to make finality and make absolute claims. And it's frustrating. But anyway, but that's the difficulty of reading these accounts that are reflections. There's lots of value, lots of gold to get out of them, but they're problematic. So anyway, that's why I absolutely love this book written in 1874, because if this guy's describing something and he gets it wrong, or if he makes up a generality, he can only make up things that he knew in 1874. So if that guy was to say, he didn't say this, but as an example, if he was to say, and yeah, the cowboys started wearing Spanish loop. Oh, I've got one right here. If he was to say, yeah, the cowboys started wearing Spanish loop holsters. If he said it, well, then we know that it wasn't misremembering, because it was written in 1874. So that one is just absolute gold, because Mexican loop. Oh, what did I say? Spanish loop? Because, in 1874, you can't remember something that happened in the 1880s. So you get what I'm saying. So that's why that book is absolutely treasured by me. And it's a book written about the cattle industry. Like, he talks about how many cattle were brought in different places and shipped different places. And he describes the cowboys. So that's where now all of a sudden we didn't have any evidence that an established cowboy look existed before the 80s. And now all of a sudden I've got really solid evidence for pre-1874. And so, yeah, that's a couple of the references I got out of that researcher's book. And I don't remember the guy's name, but just absolute gold. And all of this is available online. Just gotta know about it. So thanks to that guy. Brad, okay. The military hat with one side up. Oh, very cool. Okay. Steve Whitman says, Old Main was the first building at the University of Colorado, completed in 1876. Wow, that seems early for a university in Colorado. This year turns 150. Old photos of this building. Wow. Old for American Colorado. Spanish Colorado. I think that's something I loved about Horizon, is that he was showing the Spanish ruins in the Old West. Like, so I love about like the Alamo and the missions down there. Like these missions, I went on the 7 missions. I absolutely love Spanish missions, and they were ruins by the time. I think they were ruins by the time of the fight of the Alamo, wasn't it? Wasn't the Alamo an old fort by that time? Certainly by the time of the Old West. Dead wolf resistance, -25 wind chill. Oh my goodness. Yeah, we had a little bit of a breeze a night or two ago. It makes a huge difference. Loop holsters are your favorite designs, and Mexican loop holsters. Yeah, thanks, Justin. I like the Slim Jim, but these are nice. These are cool. Justin made this one for me, and it adds to my later impression. Of course, it just now occurs to me, if I'm doing 70s, maybe it's not right for 70s. Or maybe I'll go with that one guy's quote and say they did have them, because this guy said so. So, Dead Wolf Resistance says, do you have any knowledge of leather cowboy hat designs? And if so, when did they first appear? No. No, the leather cowboy hats is a new thing. Now let's see. When any leather hats. I mean, I do have. People like to say that nobody wore coonskin hats, and I've got references, multiple references to coonskin hats being worn in the 1860s, maybe 70s. I don't remember now. Early 70s, late 60s, both, if I remember right. In fact, maybe it was early 70s. So coonskin hats were a thing. One particular was the same time that I have the drawing of the wide brim cowboys. They got attacked by these Missourians because this was the early days, and they went up the trail through Missouri, and they're going through the forest, and these Missourians scattered their cattle and attacked the cowboys and beat them, whipped them. This was in the early days before the cowboys became really tough, and whipped them and sent them on their way because they didn't want these cattle herds coming through their land, and it worked. All the cattle drives moved eastward and quit and left those Missourians alone. But anyway, the Missourians were described as being really poor and all wearing coonskin hats because they didn't have money for hats. Oh yes, that's right. Casey brought up. I was thinking the wolf-eared caps. I thought of the wolf-eared caps, but then I wrote them off as being wool. But yeah, they made the mountain men. That was the fur trap era. They made these wolf-eared caps. I believe that was inspired by Indian tribes on the plains because they got little pointy ears, and the buffalo would see you crawling and just assume you're a wolf. That was the idea, and I've read about the trappers doing that so you can get up within shooting distance. That was back in the days when had to get 100, 200 yards range of a buffalo. Wolves were always around hanging around the buffalo. Doggone it. Just a modern thing. Apparently, I have a couple of leather designs that I use for farm and ranch work every day. A breezer leather for the hot season. Huh, interesting. John Chick. Hey, John. Man, I am cold. That's the main design flaw in this house is it's almost always cold on the floor, which I got my boot inserts that I wear for slippers. Right now I'm wearing my super cool cowboy boots. I love these boots, but they're awfully cold. So I'm designing a floor, and I might even do it to this cabin. I'm going to design a floor, and I want to do it either to this one or the next one I build, where I get about that much insulation, and then I leave about this much room above the insulation and the floor surface, and make the floor surface as thin as I can. That might require more floor joists to have a thinner surface, and then run my diesel heater, which I don't use, but I need to set it up. Run my diesel heater to blow warm air. At first I was thinking of running hot water through, and I thought, well, why do that? And then I thought about running ductwork through. And I thought, well, I don't even need to do that. I can just blow the warm air. I don't have to run ductwork. That's an evolution of the ideas coming together. So I could have the diesel heater outside blowing warm air into the floor, but the sides and the floor is so insulated that the heat goes upward. And man, I want to do that. I doubt I'm going to do it before this winter is over. I would have to make the floor lower on this. I don't have room to elevate the floor here. I guess the other thing I could do is use that heater and blast it at floor level. but I like using the fireplace too much. Anyway, I'm going to eventually design a home that's way more comfortable than people have in their own civilized world, and demonstrate that this lifestyle is far superior. So I'm looking forward to that. I really need to cap off. I need to finish my roof. I got to add more insulation up there, and the front side is actually open. I need to go out and cut the triangles to cap the front and the back. The back is covered by plastic so no wind comes through, but I really need to at least cover the front. So it'll be interesting to see if that helps a lot. I suspect it will, because this place isn't quite as easy to warm as I would expect it to be. And that's the major weak point. I've got this 22-inch gap here that's not insulated, but I really don't think that's making a big enough difference. Like I've got a lot of experience heating a house that was not insulated at all, and I stayed warm. So I really don't think that 22-inch wall there is making the difference. So Dead Wolf Resistance, trapped air and insulation. Yeah, I really think I'm underestimating how cold that is making it. So maybe I'll go cut that today. I skirt my travel trailer with tarps. It's absolutely necessary for warmth. Got to keep the cold air out from under the floor. Oh, yes. So for flooring, I've got about 7 inches, maybe 8 inches of insulation in the floor. Let's see, probably close to 7. Probably safe to at least say 7. So that's a lot of insulation. A 5.5-inch stud wall, 2x6 stud wall, is pretty normal for floor, wall, and roof. So 7 inches is, I have been assuming, that's probably good, but I have airflow right under it. So I really need to trap that and see the difference. And that's part of the fun, is experiencing it and then changing it and seeing how much difference it actually makes through experience. So thanks for bringing that up. I need to cap that off. It was my plan this year, because I'm also sitting on a trailer, and under the trailer is free air movement. So I need to close off all of that. Casey says, I skirted my travel trailer with styrofoam screwed to plywood. Locked in air around the trailer keeps the rats out mostly too. Yeah, fortunately I don't have a mouse problem in here. I have a mouse problem outside where I leave stuff at night, and then like my popcorn, I have to keep this indoors now because the mice keep getting in it, and then I gotta sterilize it. It's disgusting. But they're not getting inside, and that's important. I made the floor, I sealed off the floor and the walls. The only place they could come in is through the front door, and even if they come in here, they've got nowhere to hide. No, I got one little gap. I need to do my flooring in here. I haven't done the flooring yet. All of that's so low priority. I got way too many things that I need to do, just like anybody. Yeah, don't friends that stay behind my aunt's place every now and then. A camper closed off the bottom part, and it actually is pretty warm in there. Yeah, cool. I believe it. Yeah, I have friends. Hey, Brad has friends. Yeah, I might been. So we'll see. I got to make those changes, and then maybe I'll be saying. But then we also got to keep the same temperatures going on. We had 10 days of spring weather forecast, And then we're about 4 or 5 days into that 10-day forecast. And all of a sudden it changed from highs in the 40s during the day to highs in the 30s. And it changed from lows in the 30s to lows in the 20s, which I'm happy about. I'd like it to be colder. It's just funny how unreliable our forecasts are. And yeah, I look at it all the time anyway. All right, folks. Well, I hope this has been informational. I always love a chance to talk history. And I guess I better turn this off and feed my dogs, who are being extremely patient. Even though, now that I think about it, Maddie had at least a pound of meat to eat last night, if not more. Oh, yeah, Casey brings up not enough snow. Hey, don't forget 2000, what years was it? Well, 17, 18, and 19, if I remember right. We had a year here where we suddenly got like 2 or 3 feet of snow in March or April. I think that was 18, 19. It was when we had snowpocalypse. Snowmageddon. That was a fun year. I got snowed in down at my other place. And that was wild getting all that snow that late, because it was like spring. Well, and even in 2021 or 22, I expected an early spring like we had been having a couple years before. And I even did a camp video out on my property, and it was nice weather pretty much for winter, February. And then it was after that I did my really cold weather videos, and we had 2 feet of snow. So who knows? All that to say, hopefully we still get a cold, snowy winter. Because, yeah, there has not been that much snow. It's weird how we had tons of snow, flooding, and now nothing. I got room to build a rock hearth, but I think a rock hearth would be too heavy. I got these bricks. I think that to utilize mass for staying warm, it'd be too heavy for my floor, but also I think it would take too much. I mean, back when mass heaters were all the crave for off-grid living, I looked into them and saw people. I talked to somebody that had one too, and it takes a big mass to warm a place. I don't know, maybe if I piled this with 50 bricks, it might make a difference, especially if I get that insulation change that we've been talking about. 23 was when we had the big fire here. Oh yeah, I think that was when, hopefully we don't have fires this year. Oh yeah. Yeah, if we'd get the snow, I could bank the snow around it. But that was a good point with the tarp. I've been imagining needing plywood. I used up all my OSB somewhere else. My old OSB that's kind of spongy. And I was going to use it around my trailer this year. That was my plan, but I used it elsewhere. So maybe I'll use a tarp. I've got a tarp I'm not using. Whew. All right. Well, my throat's dry. I think it's time to call this off. And if it's too cold, I might just sit inside and watch movies. Research. Because I'm a filmmaker and I got to learn how to make movies. So I've got an excuse to sit around and watch movies now. All right. Thanks for chiming in, everybody. Thanks for hanging in there and watching. And hopefully we get snow. And hopefully you all get out and enjoy nature. Yeah, see you later, Casey. Thanks for joining. Thanks for joining, everybody. All right, remember, life's a lot more fun over on the wild side.